Imagine for a second that you are running a marathon.
Oh, I'd rather not, but okay.
Just stick with me here. You are completely exhausted. You have this heavy pack digging into your shoulders. Your feet are blistered, and the finish line is right there.
You can literally see your family waiting for you.
Exactly. But just as you are about to cross that line, someone steps in front of you with a clipboard, blocks your path, and says, "Hey, hold on. Before you can go home and rest, I need you to fill out this incredibly personal, highly invasive assessment about your mental health."
Yeah, that would not go over well.
No, it wouldn't. You just want to go home.
Right.
Most of us in that situation would just, check whatever boxes we needed to check to get past that clipboard.
Which is the ultimate conflict of interest. I mean, you have a massive system desperately trying to catch people who are falling, but you are dealing with human beings who are highly motivated to pretend they aren't falling, just so they can finally exit that very system.
Right. And that tension, that massive gap between what a system requires on a piece of paper and how human beings actually behave in the real world, that's exactly what we are unpacking today.
It's a huge issue.
It really is. So, welcome to this deep dive into the source material. This is our weekly coverage for The Veteran Voice, covering veteran news for July 27 to August 2, 2026.
And as we go through the source material today, there is a very clear overarching theme that kind of ties everything together.
Definitely.
We are seeing a lot of new authority on paper, but there is this massive open question about real-world delivery. The VA and the Pentagon are rolling out new rules, cutting-edge medical trials, and, unprecedented financial powers.
Right.
But how they actually land with veterans, how they impact you or the veterans in your life, that is the true test.
It's the only test that matters. And we're going to break this down into 4 key areas today. First, we'll look at the Pentagon's new mental health handoff rules for troops leaving the military.
Which ties right into your marathon analogy.
Exactly. Then we'll cover the VA's brand new semaglutide trial for alcohol use disorder, which has sites in Seattle and Portland.
That one is fascinating.
It really is. Third, we're going to dive into the VA's new authority to pay up to 10 months of a homeless veteran's rent. And finally, we have to talk about the traumatic brain injuries among the 600-plus troops wounded in the ongoing war with Iran.
It is a lot of ground to cover.
It is. So let's start right at that finish line I was just talking about. On July 30th, the Defense Department published some highly anticipated new rules regarding mental health care for troops leaving the service.
Right.
The updated instruction requires every single military branch to give separating service members a mental health assessment and a suicide risk screening. And this has to happen within 180 days of their discharge date.
Which is a very specific window.
Yeah. It also formalizes the handoff of a service member's care to the VA or another command, heavily utilizing a program called In Transition.
And we really need to dig into the data to understand why this specific 180-day window is being so heavily scrutinized by the Pentagon right now.
Because the numbers are grim.
They are. The year immediately following separation is the absolute highest risk period for veteran suicide. Researchers have documented this pattern for years.
Right.
For the troops who are already in treatment while in uniform, they now have a clearer path to keep that care going. But the demographic the experts are truly terrified about are the veterans who never sought care in the first place.
The ones who just want to cross the finish line.
Exactly, and who are now stepping out into the civilian world completely unanchored.
And the numbers showing the scale of that underlying problem are, they are honestly staggering.
Yeah, they really highlight the urgency.
Just a few days prior to this new rule, on July 20th, a massive survey was published in JAMA Network Open. This was conducted by the VA's National Center for PTSD and the Yale School of Medicine.
That was a huge study.
Huge. They surveyed 2,636 veterans. What they found was that 13.4% of those veterans reported having suicidal thoughts in just the previous 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. Which is a massive jump.
It really is.
To put that into perspective for you, if you look at a comparable survey done back in 2019 and 2020, that number was 9.0%.
So we are looking at an increase of nearly 50% in just a few years.
Yeah, a 50% jump. While the rates of suicide planning and actual attempts held relatively steady, that underlying foundation of ideation is just swelling.
And it's not affecting everyone equally, right?
Right. It is hitting specific demographics harder. Younger veterans and women veterans reported higher rates across the board.
But there is a silver lining in that same study, right?
Yeah.
It essentially proves that staying connected to the system actually works.
It absolutely does. And this is the crucial takeaway from that Yale study. Of the veterans reporting recent suicidal thoughts, 53.6% of those whose primary care was the VA were currently in mental health treatment. But compare that to the veterans who got their care mostly outside the VA. Only 25.6% of them were in treatment.
Wow. That's a massive difference.
It is. So the VA net, when someone is actually inside it, is highly effective at catching them.
Okay, but this brings me right back to my marathon runner analogy. I mean, I have to push back on this new DoD rule a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
If we know the net works, but we also know people actively avoid the net, isn't this new Pentagon rule just asking a runner with a broken leg if they are fine right as they cross the finish line?
It is a valid question.
Because I was looking at a DoD Inspector General report from fiscal year 2020, and they found that only 34% of separating troops even received this outgoing assessment in the first place.
Which is terribly low.
Right. So how is a new paperwork mandate going to fix the underlying psychology of why troops hide their pain?
You've hit on the exact delivery problem we talked about at the start. You can mandate a screening all day long, but a screening only works if a person answers honestly. Harold Kudler, who is the former head of VA mental health policy, reviewed these new rules. And he noted that on paper, it is a brilliantly woven net.
On paper.
Right, on paper. But as he points out, you cannot account for people who are structurally conditioned to not tell you the truth. And the primary driver of that silence is military culture itself.
Because they have everything to lose by being honest on that form.
Precisely. Carl Castro, who directs veterans policy research at the RAND Corporation, explains the mechanics of this fear perfectly.
What does he say?
Well, if you are a separating service member looking to transition into a civilian contractor job, that job often relies on you maintaining your security clearance.
Right.
So troops fear that checking a box saying, yes, I am struggling with my mental health, will either delay their separation date entirely or cause them to lose that security clearance.
And if your post-military livelihood relies on it, you are going to keep your mouth shut.
Exactly. So the system actually incentivizes lying. Castro argues that more screening isn't the answer at all.
And what is?
He says the transition process needs to be, quote, uplifting. It needs to be focused entirely on connection, saying, hey, here is the VA, here are your contacts, here's how we support you.
Rather than treating the exit interview like an interrogation where the service member is on trial.
Exactly. Keith Hotley, the CEO of Stop Soldier Suicide, echoed this too. He called civilian reintegration a, quote, perfect storm for risk.
And because it is a perfect storm, we want to be very direct with you listening right now. We don't want to sensationalize this, but we do want to be absolutely clear.
Right.
If you are separating in the next 6 months, ask your medical provider directly about this assessment and ask about the in-transition program.
It's so important.
It is. Most importantly, if you are a veteran in crisis or if you are worried about someone who is, please dial 988 and press 1.
You can also text 838-255.
Yes, or chat at veteranscrisisline.net. You do not need to be enrolled in VA healthcare or benefits to use it.
It is honestly the most vital resource we will share today.
Agreed.
And if we connect this psychological barrier to the bigger picture, the mental health struggles during that transition period so frequently overlap with other profound challenges.
Like substance abuse.
Exactly. When people are hiding their pain to protect their careers, they often turn to self-medication. Which brings us to a really fascinating development in addiction treatment.
Yes. The Ozempic trial.
Right. The VA is currently testing a highly publicized blockbuster drug for a completely new life-saving purpose.
I found this part of the research incredible. On July 30th, the VA announced a brand new clinical trial testing whether semaglutide, which most of you know under the brand names Ozempic or Wegovy, can actually help veterans with alcohol use disorder drink less.
It's a huge pivot for that drug.
It is. Recruitment for this trial officially opened on July 28th at 18 different VA medical centers. And for our listeners in the Pacific Northwest, this is happening right in your backyard.
Right. The trial sites include the VA Puget Sound Healthcare System in Seattle and the Portland VA Medical Center in Oregon.
And the scope of what they're trying to address here is massive. Currently, the VA says over 400,000 veterans have an active diagnosis of alcohol use disorder, or AUD.
Which is a staggering number of people. We have established treatments for AUD, and they do work for some people, but they certainly do not work for everyone.
Right.
Addiction is notoriously difficult to treat because it physically rewires the brain. This trial is explicitly aimed at finding a new tool to close that gap.
So let's break down the mechanics of this trial. It's officially called the Cessation or Reduction of Alcohol Consumption in Veterans Study.
That's a mouthful.
It is. They are enrolling over 600 veterans, ranging in age from 18 all the way to 80, who have moderate or severe AUD.
Okay.
For 24 weeks, participants will get a weekly injection of either semaglutide or a placebo, followed by a safety check.
Got it.
But here's what I need you to explain. Ozempic is famous for diabetes and weight loss. What on earth is the biological connection between insulin regulation and a craving for alcohol?
That is where the neuroscience gets really fascinating. Semaglutide is currently FDA approved for type 2 diabetes and weight management, right? It is not approved for AUD.
Right.
However, it belongs to a class of drugs called GLP-1 receptor agonists. Researchers have observed that these GLP-1 receptors aren't just in your gut, they are heavily concentrated in the mesolimbic pathways of the brain.
Which is what exactly?
That is the brain's reward center.
Oh, wow. So it's not just slowing down digestion, it's actively changing how the brain anticipates a reward.
Exactly. Think of it this way. It's like finding out that the thermostat in your hallway is actually hardwired to the volume knob on your stereo.
That's wild.
Right. Scientists are realizing that the hormone pathway that tells your body, hey, I'm full from this food, I don't need any more, is wired to the exact same neural switch that says, I'm satisfied with this drink, I don't need another.
So it turns down the noise.
Yeah. Back in March, an analysis showed that patients taking these GLP-1 drugs for diabetes had significantly lower rates of alcohol use disorder compared to similar patients on different meds.
Which explains the VA's interest.
Exactly. VA Secretary Doug Collins actually championed this trial because the VA's massive closed-loop healthcare system is uniquely situated to run a placebo-controlled trial of this scale.
Okay, but I have to throw a major caution flag here, though. This neuroscience is incredibly exciting, but we need to be careful.
We do.
You wouldn't completely rewire your house's electrical panel just because you read a blog post about a cool new light switch. You wait for the electrician to map it out.
That is a very necessary warning. An observation in medical records is not the same as clinical proof.
Right.
The VA attached a very strict advisory to this announcement. They are telling veterans not to self-medicate, not to seek off-label prescriptions prematurely, and absolutely not to swap out AUD treatments that are currently working for them.
Right, because this is a placebo-controlled trial, meaning some people are getting the drug and some are getting a saline shot, and the answers are going to take time.
A lot of time.
Every single participant has to go through 24 weeks of injections before the safety follow-up even starts. If you are interested, talk to your VA provider or check clinicaltrials.gov, but do not go rogue with your prescriptions.
Exactly. You need a solid, medically sound foundation before you can build a recovery. And, speaking of foundations, we really can't talk about the neuroscience of treating alcohol use disorder or suicidal ideation if a veteran is living in a constant state of survival mode.
No, you can't.
You cannot effectively treat mental health if a veteran doesn't have a safe place to sleep at night.
Which perfectly transitions us to the next massive shift we're looking at in the source material, housing.
Yes.
As of July 29th, a sweeping new authority has taken effect that literally allows the VA to pay a homeless veteran's rent for up to 10 months.
Which is huge.
It is. This authority runs all the way through September 30th, 2027. It was born out of Section 403 of the Senator Elizabeth Dole 21st Century Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act, which, if you recall, became law back in January 2025.
And the specifics of what this authority covers are just unprecedented in their flexibility.
Yeah, so?
Well, yes, it can cover up to 10 months of rent within any 2-year period. But it doesn't stop there. It also covers utility bills.
Wow.
It can buy groceries or prepared meals. It covers security deposits, generally once every 2 years. It pays for transit vouchers or ride shares to medical appointments, legal court dates, or job searches.
That's a lot of coverage.
It gets better. The VA can even buy a veteran a smartphone and a service plan if they need it to communicate with a clinician or a landlord.
Wait, let me make sure I'm following the mechanics of this, because I can already hear the critics asking this right now. Are they just handing a homeless veteran a stack of cash and hoping they spend it on rent?
No, absolutely not. No cash changes hands with the veteran directly.
Okay, so how does it work?
Here is how the mechanism functions. Clinical staff, primarily VA social workers, they assess the veteran's specific needs. Then, the VA Medical Center buys the goods or cuts a check directly to the providers, the landlords, or utility companies.
So it's highly targeted.
Exactly. The goal is to deploy funds surgically to stop an eviction before it happens, or to remove the physical barriers to facilitating healthcare.
To put into context why this surgical deployment of funds matters so much right now, we have to look at the latest HUD data.
The numbers are tough.
The 2025 point-in-time count, which was taken on a single night in January, showed 32,495 homeless veterans. Now, on one hand, veteran homelessness is down 56% since 2009.
Which is great progress.
It is, but the momentum has severely stalled. That 2025 number is only a 1% drop from 2024.
But we know this specific financial strategy, this idea of directly paying the micro costs of living, actually works.
How do we know?
Because the VA already tested a proof of concept. During the pandemic, the VA ran a very similar, highly flexible authority tied to the COVID public health emergency. This ran from May 2021 to May 2023.
And what were the results?
The numbers from that pilot are staggering. They helped over 69,300 veterans. They spent $13.1 million on goods.
Like what kind of goods?
Things like groceries, furniture, apartment startup kits. And they provided 494,000 ride shares worth over $16 million to more than 44,000 veterans.
Oh, wow. When you look at those rideshare numbers specifically, it highlights a really profound reality. The line between homelessness and stable housing is incredibly thin.
It is.
It's almost invisible. It is often just a dead phone, an unpaid electric bill, a missed ride to a job interview, or a security deposit that nobody can cover. It is micro barriers that cause macro collapses.
Exactly. The system is finally recognizing that paying a $50 water bill today is drastically cheaper and more humane than treating a veteran for chronic exposure and addiction on the streets 3 months from now.
So here is the action step. If you are a veteran facing homelessness, or if you are on the brink of it, call the National Call Center for Homeless Veterans at 877-424-3838.
And that is open 204/7.
Yes, open all day and night. And keep in mind, eligibility follows the federal definition of homelessness, which includes people in shelters, people sleeping in places not meant for habitation, and folks fleeing domestic violence.
Why?
The authority expires on September 30th, 2027. So the VA has a little over 2 years to prove how effective this new approach can be.
Which is critical because while the VA is testing these new housing authorities and addiction treatments for today's veterans, we have to look at the future of this system.
Right, the pipeline.
Exactly. A brand new generation of veterans is being created right now in the Middle East, and they are bringing incredibly complex, difficult to diagnose injuries with them.
We absolutely have to talk about this. On July 29th, reports confirmed the devastating toll of the now 5-month war with Iran, which began back on February 28th.
It's been a brutal few months.
It has. The Pentagon's casualty database counts 624 U.S. service members wounded and 18 killed as of late July. And the most alarming part of this data, most of those wounded suffered traumatic brain injuries, or TBIs.
To understand why this specific injury is spiking so aggressively, we really have to look at the weaponry and the physics of this particular conflict.
The drones.
Yes. In the early days of the war, U.S. estimates say Iran fired more than 2,000 one-way attack drones. Now, U.S. air defenses have been highly effective. They stopped all but about 100 of the 8,500 total drones and missiles launched.
Right.
But the 100 that do get through are absolutely devastating.
The specs on these drones are terrifying. Take the Shahed 136, for example. It measures roughly 8 by 11 feet. It flies at 115 miles per hour, and it carries a 120-pound warhead.
They are massive.
Yeah. And they are reaching large, established U.S. bases, far from any traditional front line. But why are they causing TBIs at a higher rate than what we saw in Iraq or Afghanistan? I mean, an explosion is an explosion, right?
Actually, no. The physics of the blast wave make a massive anatomical difference.
How so?
Dr. James Kelly, who is the chief medical scientist at the Invisible Wounds Foundation and the founding director of the Pentagon's National Intrepid Center of Excellence, he explained this mechanism perfectly.
Okay, what did he say?
In Iraq and Afghanistan, most blast injuries came from roadside bombs, or IEDs. The force came from the ground up, and much of it was absorbed by vehicle armor or the ground itself.
Right, that makes sense.
But these drones detonate from above, creating an airburst. As Dr. Kelly notes, anatomically, the human head is vastly more vulnerable to overhead blasts.
Oh, wow.
The force of the explosion happens in the air, radiating downward, which puts immense concussive pressure directly onto the cranium. It physically compresses the skull and the fluids surrounding the brain in a way that ground forces simply don't.
And this brings us to a frankly shocking contradiction in how the government is handling this. Just as we are seeing this spike in complex drone-induced overhead TBIs, the funding to study them is vanishing.
It's unbelievable.
Roll Call reported that Pentagon funding for brain injury research was just slashed by over 75%. It dropped from $175 million in 2024 to just $40.5 million this year.
It is a massive, incredibly dangerous disconnect. Kelly Parker from the Wounded Warrior Project emphasizes that the nearly 500,000 traumatic brain injuries recorded by the DoD between 2000 and 2025 do not just magically heal when a deployment ends.
No, they don't.
These troops will need lifelong care. And Craig Breckheimer from the VFW is sounding the alarm on the urgent need for Congress to fund diagnostic tools.
Because diagnosis is the hardest part.
Exactly. Diagnosis right now is the weak link in the chain. There is no purely objective test for a brain injury. Doctors mostly rely on subjective questionnaires and clinical judgment.
Although there is a glimmer of hope on the diagnostic front, right? If the military can actually find the money to scale it.
Yes, the blood tests.
Right. The Army's 10th Air and Missile Defense Command, which tragically lost 2 soldiers in a July 17 attack in Jordan, is currently fielding a handheld device. It actually checks a soldier's blood for specific proteins that are released into the bloodstream immediately after a head injury.
Which is incredible technology.
It is. But again, without funding, those tools stay in small pilot programs.
And without objective tests, early TDI counts are notoriously low. Look at the historical precedent.
I mean, Alice, yeah.
Yeah. After Iran's 2020 missile attack on the Al-Assad airbase in Iraq, the military initially reported 0 casualties. 0.
Wow.
It was only through continued, rigorous screening over the following weeks that they eventually identified 110 service members who had sustained traumatic brain injuries. We are dealing with invisible wounds, and the research money to make them visible is drying up right when the threat is escalating.
So let's pull all of this together. We started today by looking at that critical 180-day window when troops leave the military and the psychological barriers that keep them from asking for help.
Right.
We explored the VA's pursuit of cutting-edge neuroscience to treat alcohol use disorder in the Pacific Northwest and the incredibly flexible new financial lifelines to keep homeless veterans housed. And we ended on the battlefields, where the next generation is sustaining invisible wounds from a new era of drone warfare.
And looking at the entire ecosystem we just mapped out, it leaves us with a really provocative tension that is hard to resolve.
What's that?
We just discussed the VA's incredible new powers to house and treat veterans, right? But if there is no objective test for brain injury, and Congress is cutting TBI research by 75% just as drone warfare peaks, how will the 600-plus troops wounded today ever prove their injuries to the VA tomorrow?
That is a chilling thought.
Will a lack of diagnostics today become the very bureaucratic wall that prevents them from accessing those housing and mental health authorities in 10 years?
It is something we all need to be paying close attention to. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material. Stay informed, support the community around you, and keep asking the hard questions. We'll catch you on the next one.